Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on what's happening on the ground and about new trends emerging within the construction industry. The show is brought to you in partnership with Place Engage, a data-driven platform for more successful public consultation and community engagement for your next development project. Ordinarily, we're chatting to experts who are building tens of homes or hundreds of homes day in, day out. Today, we've got something a little bit different. Today, I'm joined by Anna and Tom Woods, self-builders in Ireland, and you can follow their journey on Instagram at self_Mayo_build. Tom and Anna, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
It's great to meet you, Carol.
Well, this is really exciting for us because, again, this is very much an industry show where we talk to building contractors and developers, who are building at scale. And I'm a huge proponent of self-build, having grown up in a rural area, and I am currently undergoing a planning application at appeal stage myself. So I suppose I'm a huge supporter of self-builds, but I'm also intimately aware of the challenges. So thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me and share your journey. So look, first of all, tell me a little bit about yourselves and how you came to the decision of embarking on a build.
Yeah, I suppose it all started probably during the pandemic, during COVID. A bit more time in our hands to make a decision on what we're going to do next in terms of owning a home, buying a home, building a home, all of that. I'm from the country originally. I'm from the west of Ireland, and always grew up in the countryside. Always, saw myself returning to the country. I guess, for me, there was always a feeling that I could never justify, spending maybe 400,000 or 350,000, in buying an apartment or a small house in Dublin. I've, a standard country person, always had a good size house growing up, plenty of space outdoors, all that. So, I think we were kind of both very clear pretty quickly that we wanted to move out of Dublin, get out of the city at some point in our lives, and building in the country was what we wanted to do. Yeah, so I think that's where it started.
Yeah.
Anna, did you grow up in a town or country setting?
No, I grew up in a city, big city. Yeah, and that will be actually my second experience living in a small town. Yeah, and I'm sure it will be great.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope so. I'm a huge proponent of rural living, and I think that's one of the positive outcomes or almost side effects of COVID, that we've had this rural renaissance, and I'm absolutely here for it. I love it. I will do everything we can to support it. And so I mentioned there that you are building in Mayo. Prior to embarking on the build, were you renting a home?
Yeah. And we still are, as part of until we finish the house and we make the transition. But yeah, we've always been renting. Yeah.
Okay, so that's look, we know from rental prices escalating, we know that that's an added pressure, particularly when you're going through your mortgage journey. So I suppose, first of all, when you made the decision to move from renting into home ownership, did you automatically look at a build, or did you look at some existing homes on the second-hand market or new homes market?
Yeah, I think we did. We had looked around. We had looked probably within an hour of Dublin. We both live and work in Dublin at the moment. And we looked probably within an hour, and we realized very quickly that to get a home that we'd be comfortable with, we're talking upwards of 400,000.
Yeah.
I grew up not too far from the sea, so that's always been like a number one sort of tick box for me, was to be near the sea, and we just wouldn't have been able to do that on the East Coast. A big part of it as well is that my dad was a builder all his life, so he's 40, 50 years in the industry building homes. My two sisters had built their own houses, so it's in our family, it's in our blood, building a little bit, even though I don't do anything like that now, but I grew up working with my dad. So I had a lot of knowledge around building in general, building houses, and a lot of practical skills. So we knew we could do the work. as long as Dad was on board, of course.
Yeah.
And so that was a big driver as well. We kind of, we had enough experience to know building your own house is possible,
Well, I suppose beyond experience, you probably didn't have the same level of fear because you had I suppose greater knowledge of the challenges, but also having people in the industry is a massive advantage, because not only, I'm sure, is your dad lending his expertise, he's probably full-time on site, if not doing the work, then certainly overseeing it, but actually he probably has a network of contacts that he can bring in and would know the credibility and probably able to get you jumping the queue, because there's quite a queue for any sort of trades coming in at the moment.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Like Dad's knowledge has been critical. I don't think we couldn't have done it without him.
Without him, no.
We're a little bit further away from where they live, so he doesn't quite have the local contacts for suppliers and stuff out that way. We're probably an hour and a half from where my parents live. But definitely the expertise. It's all the small things that you run into on a daily basis, the small little problems that you just would lose hours maybe trying to Google it or find it online or find the correct answer. So it's the small little gaps in your knowledge that having someone like my dad is critical for you.
Well, a retainer that possibly only costs you a Sunday lunch is a very handy thing to have. So that's great. Look, well, that's fantastic. But talk to me about the process of then finding the right site. Did you look at many?
Yeah, sites. I don't think we looked many. We looked at many houses around Dublin, and then we decided that was not going to happen. Then we start looking around Mayo because you always want to live there again. And then was when we found our site. Yeah,
we kind of found the house. Yeah, so we had been we'd just been out and about driving around, and we spotted a house that had been started but abandoned. Yeah. So the block work was done, the roof was done, but nothing else. It was just a shell. And the contractor had maybe started trying to build into. Not 100% sure what happened in terms of maybe ran out of finances or whatever it was, and left them, and they're sitting for a few years, 5 or 6 years, just two shells side by side. So we decided we'd buy one. Like, we knew what would be involved in finishing it. Like, we could picture it, between my dad and everything. We had a good picture of what we'd need to do to get it up and moving. So because it was one step ahead, like, it had that much done, it was kind of a no-brainer for us to go with that, because it put us maybe 5 or 6 months ahead of starting fresh,
Oh, well, if you didn't need to go through a planning application, it possibly put you a year and 5 months ahead of that, and probably anywhere between 6,000 to 9,000 ahead, because you weren't sinking that into building or into planning. But we know during the crash that certainly there were buildings started and left, and we know after a number of years that actually it's not even a viability issue structurally, where they were left exposed to the elements, that actually it wasn't practical to go in and pick up the build where they had started. Actually, they needed to be, the works that had been done needed to be demolished and start again. So in terms of getting a structural surveyor in, did you do that at an early stage?
Yeah. The houses weren't the houses weren't kind of pre-crash or post-crash or whatever it might be. They were only 5 or 6 years, so they weren't that long built. But yeah, as part of the mortgage, we had to get an engineer out and get it all signed off and checked over and everything. Yeah, that was one of the things that made getting the mortgage a lot more difficult, was that it had been started. Yeah. They required a lot more stuff from us.
Well, actually, let's talk about the mortgage, because look, there are so many challenges to anybody getting a mortgage right now. But one of the basic requirements is that the property is habitable, and actually it is very difficult for self-builders, particularly those who are self-employed. Now, I understand you're both employees, so you didn't have that particular disadvantage with you. But getting a self-build mortgage, anything that requires payment on a staged basis, is particularly difficult. So this must, but the banks are somewhat, they are comfortable with that. They understand that as a process. Whereas actually when you're coming in with a certain amount of work done, with an estimate for what needs to be paid out? And did you have that? Did you have that broken up into the staged payments that under the estimate that you felt would be required for mortgage, or did the mortgage company do that?
So they would have required, valuation of everything that's gone into it up to that point that we bought it, and then what was needed to complete the works. So that all was taken into consideration, which probably added the layer of complexity around valuation of where it's at today versus valuation of where it will be when it's finished, and there was a constant loop of valuation. Like you get that, and then it would expire before the mortgage would have made a decision. You were going around in this loop of constantly getting it valued and updated every couple of months. And then having the engineer coming out and checking over and validating everything in terms of the foundations, the block work, the roof, all of that stuff. So there was a little bit of an extra complexity there that they required. And it probably took a bit longer, I'd say, than the normal mortgage. Like a lot of our friends up here, they would have started their mortgage process and would have been through it in a couple of months, whereas ours dragged on for a long time, actually.
Okay, but I suppose you can understand that given the situation. So maybe what you didn't need to go through in terms of planning, you possibly made up for with the mortgage. But in terms of putting your costs together, actually, what stage of the build are you at?
We're now doing a lot of we're now doing interior work, so we're kind of doing a lot of second fix stuff, heating and plumbing, electrics and plumbing, second fixes and tiling and stuff like that. Yeah, so we're not too far away.
Did you go down the kind of direct labor route, or did you bring in a contractor to do the work?
Oh, no, it was all direct labor. Yeah, we did it. We did as much. We're continuing to do as much work as we can. There's a few big jobs that we've set out, like plastering, for example, and electrical work. Obviously, you can't do without being certified to do it. So that kind of stuff. So electrics, plastering. There's some of the plumbing, we've done half the plumbing ourselves, but for the more complex stuff that my dad mightn't have encountered, like air to water heating systems, which are relatively new, we've someone coming in to do that for us. That's most of it, is it?
Yeah.
It's wonderful having your dad and that level of expertise there. And I'm conscious that both of you are still living and working in Dublin. But how hands-on have you both gotten in terms of the build?
Oh, it's 100% hands-on. Like we put up every tile ourselves. We couldn't
painting.
Everything. Oh, it's everything. We've done all the slabbing, all the insulation work, all the everything else. It's all it's myself, my dad, and me and Anna every weekend. My family again, they'd help out quite a lot. They come on site for big days, like we do a big day of just interior slabbing, we're putting up every tile ourselves, everything, it's all hands on.
That's amazing to hear. And I know there'll be people listening in here who absolutely want to do that, but maybe don't have the advantage of having somebody like your dad. So I would just take this opportunity to point out that we've actually done previous shows with a fantastic organisation down in County Clare, a social enterprise called Common Knowledge. And they actually have building courses, week-long building courses for people who actually want to get in and do this themselves, but don't know where to start. So for people who don't have the advantage of someone like your dad, just to let them know there are resources available through that social enterprise, Common Knowledge. And one of the founders there, Harrison Gardner, actually did a show on RTE helping people to build their own homes, where he essentially went in almost as a mentor. So a little bit probably like what your dad is doing, helping guide you on the process, maybe teaching you, and then let you off for the day to actually physically do the hard work.
Absolutely.
And even my dad, he's retired now, but he's still in the center of it, doing all the physical work too,
So,
100% involved in everything.
100%.
Fantastic. Well, look, again, you cannot underestimate the value of having that kind of expertise. And now that you've moved on to kind of the interior side, you must have a great sense of pride that every tile has been laid yourself and the insulation has been done yourself. How does that make you feel about the home compared to maybe anything that you've been living in up to now?
It's one of those things. I think we know that I think in 5 years, we'll know every detail. We'll know if there's a crack somewhere, we'll know how it got there. If there's, if there's I think we'll remember putting down every tile or every timber, or there's a lot. We did a lot of modifications to the house. We took out a few walls, we opened up a few windows, we did a lot of very tough jobs. And I think we'll always remember that. Like we put in angled windows and stuff like that weren't in the original design, and they were all our kind of own designs. And every time we walk in, we remember that. Even though it was tough, we kind of remember that. We put in extra roof windows and really hard jobs to retrofit. But we appreciate them so much more because we did them ourselves.
That's amazing to hear. And in terms of the estimates that you had, obviously, on the show here on a weekly basis, we're tracking and commenting on rising costs and actually material shortages, which has been huge. Inflation. There have been so many pressures that are negative for building, whether you're building housing developments or whether you're a self-builder. In fact, if anything, probably as a self-builder, you're less protected or insulated from some of these forces. So in terms of your expectations or your initial quote to where you're on track to deliver now, what how are they balancing out?
We definitely,
last year was tough. Like we were talking, you're only getting 2-week quotes, last year. Your quotes were valid, sometimes only valid for a week. So every time you return to buy something, it was €1,000 more. So I would say we're probably to do the same job that we set out to do in early 21 when we finally got on the ground and we were actually ready to go build it. The same house is going to cost probably 40 to 50,000 euro more to finish now. Because of rising costs, and that's across everything. Every single thing is €1,000 more. Whether it's the electrical works or the piping costs, or even our heating system went up probably €2,000 from the first quote to when we finally were ready to buy it. So, so much changed in last year, and with contractors or people that were helping, you have no choice because they're in your timeline. They're part of your project now, and they kind of say, well, I can't do it that price anymore, and you're left with two options: go back out trying to find someone, lose another 3 months, or pay the extra.
Did you have breathing space with your mortgage to be able to continue the build at that rate?
No. No, and and I mean the mortgage obviously builds in a small buffer to allow, but nothing compared to what happened in terms of inflation and rising costs and shortages. It just that buffer was not big enough in the mortgage these days, for that.
That's an interesting one. And yet, if we make the buffer too large, then actually it will inhibit people's ability to get the mortgage. So that's kind of a tough line to ride, both for the self-builders and for the bank. Given those pressures, how has that maybe changed your plans along the way?
You compromise, you give up unfortunately on a lot of things that you wanted. You
had to change a few plans.
Like we've probably accepted, that there'll be a lot of things left unfinished for a few years. A lot of the exterior work, like we had a garage built into our plan that might not happen in the short term. But I think we'll be happy as long as it's the house itself is at a good point by the time in the next few months. I think that's the big goal. Let's just get the house done. We'll worry about the outsides later,
Is there anything you wish you had have known before you embarked on this journey?
There's a couple of big things. Like we grossly underestimated the project management. In terms of I think both of us are we're very organized as part of our jobs. We're I'm a manager and Anna works in logistics, so we are well organized. We're people who can plan very well, I think, but building construction planning is, you almost need to be on top of it every single day. Like our day is work until 5, and then 5 until 9 is straight back online, organizing things for the next weekend, and build, what we're going to do. And if there's someone involved, like chasing them up and chasing up quotes, and particularly keeping contractors or tradespeople in line is incredibly hard. If they feel like you're not following up with them, they will just drop off for weeks or months.
Do you think that this was maybe magnified for you because you were trying to manage this build in a hands-on way, but from the other side of the country? And I know that your dad is reasonably local, but still an hour and a half away, so it's not like he's 5 miles down the road and can pop in. So does that, is that something that maybe if you were to do it again or recommend to somebody else, that maybe you should be renting closer to the site of the build?
I think would help for sure.
It would help for sure. Yeah, like it would help us because we do a lot more work ourselves in the evening times and all that. So we'd speed up the overall project, but certainly, it's more so just making sure that as soon as the plumbing is finished, the electrician is ready to come in, and when the electrician is finished, that the ESB are ready to connect it. Keeping that timeline is, you really have to know everything that comes next and the step by step, and. So I think that's been the hardest part, because sometimes you think you're ready for floor tiling, but then the tiler comes back and he says, well, actually, no, I won't do it until your electricity is on, which you haven't planned for. And you're thinking, now we have to go off and organize all this before. And then he says, well, I can't do it again now until June. It's like that. You've lost your space and we can't, so... Yeah, I think that's the biggest regret.
And also sometimes, for example, we want to hire some service or something, and the person needs to see the house. We are not there when they are available to see. So we need to kind of agree a date for this to happen, and that can take a few days and then delay more more. You know what I mean?
So, I think for most people coming into trades, they say, look, I'll call round on Saturday, but in their head they're thinking, well, look, if it's Monday or Tuesday, it's not a big deal. But obviously it's a big deal if you're at the other side of the country. And I understand from your kind of earlier comments that, a self-build is not like when you buy a house. It's like, when is it finished? To be honest, it's probably going to be an evolving work. And by the way, what you're describing here probably sounds unusual now, but actually the generation who were self-building before you never finished. There was always a room in the house that had concrete floor and that was used essentially as a storage room. And I can remember my friends that moved into homes and family members, they would have had a sitting room that only got fitted out essentially maybe in time for the kids' Holy Communion, and the children wouldn't have even been in the picture when they moved into the home or when they built the home. So like it was never a thing. It's really only in the last decade or so it feels like people were moving into ready-made homes. In fact, I remember, almost 20 years ago when I moved into my first home, we had no furniture for so long. I remember my boss called and I had to serve him tea sitting on the stairs because we had no furniture, not even a chair. So literally we entertained people sitting on the stairs. And at the time I got a gift of bean bags, these giant bean bags, which were actually passed to everybody we knew who were building homes. So they went through 5 and 6 homes before they eventually got retired. But so everyone of that generation were moving into empty homes and lived off beanbags for months, if not longer. So it's not unusual. But I suppose keeping in mind that, do you have a move-in date in mind?
Yeah, I think so. I think we would say we'll be aiming for the end of the summer, I think the end of the summer would be, the house would definitely be livable. It would be at a point where there might be 1 or 2 bedrooms, not kind of complete, but finished, everything else will be in a good shape. Yeah.
And habitable. So, but then I suppose I need to, we've been talking about this rural revival, which is amazing, but you're both currently working in Dublin. will you be able to work remotely, or are you looking at starting whole new jobs in the west of Ireland?
No. My company are incredible, Dave. Like we've gone down since pandemic. We've gone down to 2 days a week. Lots more of my colleagues now are sort of outside of Dublin these days. So I'll have a requirement to go in to the office once a week, kind of thing, or twice a week. And Anna's,
I work, fully remote at the moment.
Perfect. So you'll both be able to continue that. And so, I mean, Anna, that's fantastic for you. Tom, are you happy? Are you comfortable with the kind of 1 to 2 days per week?
Oh yeah. We're so used to traveling all the time. It means nothing to us these days, to get in the car and drive to Dublin when needed, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Very good, very good. So, I suppose the final question I have for you, and thank you so much for being so honest and open about this. And look, I'd love maybe if in a couple of months' time we could touch base with you again and see how things are going in terms of the interior work that you're doing. But I suppose final question for now: have you any advice that you can give? I mean, even though you're currently working away in your own project, I'm sure you're not immune to the barrage of news that is making it so tough for people who are in the position that you were in less than 2 years ago. Is there any bit of advice or any words of encouragement maybe you could give to anybody considering this?
Yeah, like I mean, in terms of advice, the big lesson we learned was around tradespeople, recommendations, making sure that you do your research. It can be very easy not to do research on people and not being afraid. It's like any other product, go ask people, get reviews, ask people to show you their work. Because unfortunately, we, like a lot of other people we've learned about recently, were scammed by one tradesperson, and we lost a bit of money on it. And we found out, that other people were as well in the same position, self-builders who had been scammed by tradespeople. So that was a big lesson learned for us. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed to say to someone like, I want to see your work. I want to go and see what you've done before. That was the big lesson learned. And then I think in terms of advice, like, it will be worth it. When we walk around our house and we see the size of the rooms and the little details that are all ours, that are designed by us, that were created by us.
The process, it's very slow, and you need a lot of patience to deal with people that, contractors and everything. But it will be worth.
We'll
be in our house in a lovely place, and
and I think last weekend when the sun was out, we walked out in our own space, our own backyard, and we had our, it's not much. It's there's no grass, but we kind of could say, right, that's what it was all for, your own space. You're walking around your own backyard, you're not stuck in an apartment. That feeling,
I'm genuinely so delighted for you both, and I wish you the very best of luck in the coming months. And I hope you do get to have that move-in date towards the end of the summer. But look, certainly if you're open to it, I'd love to touch base again and maybe check in and see how the interior works are going. But in the meantime, genuinely best of luck, and thank you so much for sharing your journey today.
Thanks a million. And look, we're trying our best to document it all, so it's all there on the Instagram for anyone who's interested. And I always say to people, like, feel free to ask us questions. Like, we don't know everything for sure, but we know what we've been through, and we've a good understanding. So if people ever need to ask a question or even want to know where we got something, that's the great community you get on Instagram with self-build. And you see something you like, you just go and ask someone, where did you get that, or how did you do that, or so that sort of stuff. So lovely community there, I think, on Instagram for that stuff. And if you want more knowledge, that's a great place to start. Build up that self-builder community around you,
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Tom and Anna Woods. And as Tom mentioned there, you can follow Tom and Anna's journey there at self_Mayo_build on Instagram. And that's all we've time for today. My thanks to show producer Katie Tallon and to the podcast production team at Hear Me Roar Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out other real estate and construction shows on iPropertyRadio. Before we go, I'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor, Place Engage, using immersive technologies for a data-driven platform for more successful public consultation and community engagement. Thank you for the support. Without this conversation, it just wouldn't be possible. And thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of Breaking Ground on iProperty Radio.